Hi everybody, my name's Louise and this will be the third of 6 mindfulness sessions that I'll be delivering as part of RigRun Recovery Zone. Now let's just do a little recap on what we've looked at so far. So first of all, we've learned that mindfulness is not about trying not to think. So most people think that they can't do mindfulness because their brain just keeps thinking of things. So they think, oh, it's not for me. I just can't clear my mind of thoughts. Well, in fact, you've learned in the last 2 sessions that you're not meant to be able to clear your mind of thoughts. It's impossible to clear your mind of thoughts. You have no control over thoughts popping into your mind. So mindfulness is not about clearing your mind of all thoughts. What we learn in mindfulness is that although we can't control thoughts popping into the mind, we can't have a clear head, we can choose whether we wish to hang out with our thoughts or not. So we can either get caught up in our thinking, which is what we do most of the time. Most of us are distracted or lost in thought most of the day. Or we can choose to take our attention elsewhere. And this is what mindfulness is all about. Instead of allowing our attention to drift away and be lost in thought, we allow our attention, or we deliberately take our attention to the present moment, which can be resting your attention on breath. You can only ever experience your breath in the absolute here and now, or indeed resting your attention on body sensations. You can only feel the body in the present moment, or resting your attention on sound, which can only be experienced in the present moment. So we've learned that mindfulness is not about having a blank head or clearing our mind of thoughts. We're just simply leaving the mind be, leaving it to do its thing, and deliberately taking our attention elsewhere and resting attention on that. So we're basically, every time we're doing a meditation, we might not feel relaxed, because actually meditations can be almost a little workout for the mind, where we are resting our attention's maybe lost in thought, and then we bring it back deliberately to breath, or basically the present moment. So you might have to do that at least 100 times in the meditation, drift away into thinking, which is our habit, and then deliberately bring your attention back to the sensations of breath or body or sound. So that back and forth is like working the muscle of mindfulness. And every time you do that, you're strengthening your habit of being in the present moment, as opposed to being lost in thought. So now this takes us to today's session, where we're going to talk about, well, what is the problem with being lost in thought? Why shouldn't I be lost in thought? And this is where we're going to be talking about today, about the evolutionary brain. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So you can see a PowerPoint presentation. Here we go. Okay. This up here. Okay, so it's quite important to be able to understand how the brain works, to then understand, well, why are we doing this mindfulness thing in the first place? Why are we trying to build new habits of being away from our thoughts, resting our attention somewhere else? So in actual fact, human beings have got 3 brains in their head. So we've got the oldest brain, then a middle-aged brain, and then we've got this newest brain that's been sort of evolved through evolution. So if you can think of the brain a bit like your kind of phone models, if you think back to maybe 20 years ago, phones were pretty clunky and they had actual buttons on them, and we were quite limited to what we could do. So that's a bit like the pink brain there in the middle of the screen. So that's what we call the reptile brain. It was the first model of the brain that existed on planet Earth with evolution. So lots of species have that reptile pink brain still today. For example, reptiles have it. So it's a very simple model of a brain, just like the first model of mobile phones. And it just does some basic tasks, which are just really about survival. So it's driving the species towards things that will help them survive, like food and shelter and water. And it's driving the species away from things that threaten survival. So that's our fight or flight response, where we might run away from danger, or we might fight it. So if you can think of a reptile, you know, crocodiles and alligators, they can be quite aggressive because that fight flight mode is really strong in them. Other animals might be more prone to be just running away or flying away like little birds or something. So yeah, that's the first model of the brain, like the first model of mobile phones. Pretty simple. Now, the problem with the brain is we can't just scrap an old model and start again. So unlike, you know, our smartphones nowadays, which are a complete redesign, unfortunately, as the brain has evolved in evolution, we're still sitting with the old models inside the new model, if that makes sense. So this is what causes human beings or advanced evolved species to be quite complex, because we've got these three kind of variations of the brain. So this turquoise brain here is what we call the emotional brain. And this was the sort of second model of the brain in evolutionary terms. So these species were a bit more advanced. Rather than just lay eggs and then run away, they actually cared for their young. So they had a more evolved brain that experienced things like maternal love and other more evolved emotions such as jealousy and shame. So those kind of emotions are kind of more advanced compared to anger and anxiety. Anger and anxiety are literally just about feeling fear and running away, or feeling anger and fighting. So fight or flight, that's the pink brain. Whereas the turquoise brain, like being able to feel jealousy and shame, means that you care about what others in your group think about you. And then you behave accordingly to avoid those feelings. So then that makes you comply and try to behave in a way where you are accepted and kept within the group, because that helps you survive as well. So yeah, so this turquoise brain, lots of species on the planet have this. And then when we move into the yellow brain is basically the most advanced model of the brain. So this is like our iPhone 14s, for example. It's amazing. So not only does it have more advanced emotions like the jealousy and the shame and so on, and maternal love, there's also an ability to reflect and imagine, which these first two brains don't have the ability to do. So what I mean by that is, when something happens in our lives, we are then able to reflect upon it after it's happened. So we're able to go back to that memory and go over it quite vividly. And you might find that you go over past events, you know, frequently, like what we might call rumination. We go over and over things. So that is a very advanced survival skill, because if you can reflect on things, then you are able to learn from them and then make sure maybe you don't do it again or you make some changes the next time. So that's why we now have that ability to reflect, is why we now have tools and science and technology and language and maths and so forth. The third brain, or the newest model of the brain, also has the ability to imagine. So not only can we, reflect upon the past, we can also imagine the future. And that is an incredible survival skill as well, because it means we can imagine the what ifs and then maybe put safety controls in place before something dangerous or threatening happens. The ability to imagine is also why we have art and design and new technologies and inventions, because that ability to imagine and create is there in the most kind of recent model of our brain. So we human beings are the only species on the planet who have these three layers of brain, or these three models of phone, and the biggest third layer as well. There are some species with a third layer, but we have the biggest one. So you might be thinking, well, why is that a bad thing? Why are you talking about this? Well, whilst it's a fantastic thing to be able to reflect and imagine, go into the past and the future, the problem is that because we have these old models of brain still sitting inside the new model, they actually have an effect on the newest model. So this reptile type brain here, although it's quite small, it's actually incredibly powerful still. You can just imagine your sort of fight or flight is still very strong in you as a modern day human. You still will feel anxiety and fear. You still will feel anger. You'll still get those impulses to want to avoid or run or, lash out when you feel angry somehow or another. So that first brain, what it does is it actually has a very strong effect on the third brain, the newest model of the iPhone. So what it does is it influences what we go to when we're reflecting on past events. And it also influences what we go to when we're imagining future events. So instead of maybe us, going over a past event that was pleasant, like a holiday or a nice meal, the first brain kind of hijacks it and says, look, I want you to go over things that went wrong in the past, because I'm actually really only interested in survival. So I'm not interested in going over what went well or what was pleasant in the past, because that doesn't help me survive. I want to know what went wrong and I want us to learn from it. So that is why you might find that you go over and over things that went wrong. You might be on your drive on your way home from work, and rather than think of all the things you accomplished today or that went well today, you might be going over that one thing that went wrong. Or maybe when you're waking up in the middle of the night, that's what will pop in. It's what went wrong today, rather than what went right or what went well. And then the same again, when we're going into imagining the future, this pink brain kind of takes over with its own agenda, and it says, look, I don't want you to be thinking about creative things or positive things like what you'll do on holiday or this thing you're looking forward to. I want you to imagine all the things that might go wrong in the future, the what ifs. The what if this, that, well, that'll be a disaster, that'll be a catastrophe, and I won't be able to cope with it. So again, if you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night and, not getting back to sleep, this is often the kind of thing that you might be doing is going over the what ifs, the disasters that might go wrong, and undermining your ability to cope with them, kind of catastrophizing. So yeah, so it's a fantastic survival skill to do that. It makes us very strong to be able to go over what went wrong and learn from it, imagine what might go wrong and stay away from it. That keeps us alive. Um, but the problem is that that has a very negative impact on our mental well-being and our emotional well-being. And it also has an impact on, just our behaviors as well, and, how we steer ourselves through our lives. So this is the problem. This is why it is a problem to allow your attention to just drift into thinking and be lost there for hours on end each day. Because if you allow your attention to do that, then typically your mind will be getting caught up in thoughts of what went wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, we need to go over what went wrong to learn. But what we tend to do is ruminate. So we'll go over and over things past the point of learning from them, and going over and over things that went wrong, like the shoulda, woulda, couldas, the regrets, the if onlys. That tends to have an impact on us in terms of making us feel sad, making us feel shame, making us feel depressed. So it has a very powerful effect on our mental health. Then if, our mind will also hop to the what ifs, like the things that might go wrong. And again, that tends to trigger difficult emotions like worry and fear, or anxiety even, can be quite strong anxiety, triggering of panic attacks and so forth. So if you allow your attention to just drift to, your brain's own selfish interests, which is, typically this pink brain wanting to survive, then you will typically find that your stress levels are quite high and you're experiencing an unhelpful amount of difficult emotions. Difficult emotions are important to tell us that there's something wrong that we need to sort out, but we don't want to be experiencing them all the time and unnecessarily. So there is nothing we can do about the fact that we have a brain like this. We've been given it through millions of years of evolution. You can't change it, but what you can do is work very skillfully with it. So the first thing we can do is accept, right, this is how the brain is, and perhaps gain some comfort from the fact that there's nothing wrong with you. You might have thought, why am I a worrier? Why am I like this? There's something wrong with me. But in fact, actually, it's normal to have quite a negative tendency in our mindset. It's an evolutionary, development for survival. So there is nothing wrong with you, and it's not your fault that your mind is like this. So that's the first thing to learn, which is really helpful for a lot of people in the first place. And also, it's quite comforting to realize, hang on, it's, not just me that's like this. We are all like this. Because you can often feel quite alone when you're thinking, why me? Why am I like this? Everyone else is happy. And actually, everyone else is experiencing this as well, to some degree or another. So we've been born with a very, very tricky, complex mind. And, evolution has designed the brain to help you survive. It doesn't care a jot whether you are happy or not, okay? So happiness and contentment and peace, that boils down to you. We can't change this brain that we've been born with, but we can very much, take ownership and work with this brain we've been born with skillfully. So that is why in mindfulness, we're building this new habit of having our attention in the present moment. If we're building a habit of resting attention on things like our breath or our body sensations or sound, then we are away from the types of thoughts that are in the mind that are typically, going over what went wrong, worrying about what might happen. Resting your attention in the present moment is the most neutral and calm place you can be. So often people think of mindfulness as, okay, what I need to do when I meditate is just escape and get away from everything. But in fact, drifting away and getting away is actually the worst thing you can do. Mindfulness is about coming home to the present moment. And actually, this is the safest, calmest, most neutral place you can be. So mindfulness is about waking up. It's about coming home. It's about coming back to the here and now. And we're doing it because it's so beneficial to come back to the present moment and not be caught up in all these kind of, shoulda, woulda, couldas, what ifs, catastrophization type thoughts. So as we strengthen that habit of coming back to the present moment, we naturally find that we are experiencing less difficult emotions. And in doing so, then we experience better mental well-being, and we're in a better place to actually respond to life's difficulties. So if you think you're feeling a bit calmer, you're feeling a bit less anxious, maybe a bit less angry or grumpy, that puts you in a much better place to respond skillfully to life's challenges, which we all have. Whereas when you're feeling really stressed or really anxious and sleep deprived, we tend to make the problems that we're faced with in life even worse than we tend to sort of go in a downward spiral and react to them in unhelpful ways. So actually, just this simple act of repeatedly coming back to the present moment is so, so important. So good for your mental health and so good for your physical well-being as well. So if we think about, the effect that the stress hormones have on our bodies, adrenaline and cortisol put our heart rate up, our blood pressure up. You might have muscular tension, which then causes headaches, gastric issues for being stressed, back pain, not being able to sleep, and so on. So if we can just calm that down a bit, those stress hormones, then quite literally we're experiencing better physical health as well. So the science is that even if you can just keep your attention in the present moment, like your breath or your body, for just 3 minutes, then that is enough to change the chemistry in your body. So for your body to stop releasing stress hormones, and then your body gets time to rest and recover. So whatever you're interested in, whether it's for mental well-being or emotional well-being or physical well-being, just this act of constantly bringing yourself back to the present moment is very, very important. So never see meditations as something that should, never set your expectations up as though you should be feeling really relaxed in a mindfulness meditation. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to train your attention to rest elsewhere. So it's like going to the gym. It's not a relaxing experience maybe at the time, because you're working the muscles, but you're experiencing the benefits after. And that's the same as meditation. We meditate, we go, oh, I keep going off to thinking, I come back to the breath, and we do it over and over. We work the muscle. while we're meditating for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then the benefits come after the meditation. So the more we do this, if we do it every day or a few times a week, the fitter you will become, the more mindful you will become. So yeah, so let's just conclude today's session. As human beings, we suffer incredibly. We have a very complicated brain, where an animal might hear a rustle in the bushes and feel a bit anxious and run away. When they then get to the next field or forest, they calm down and they just get on with what they're doing. Whereas a human being, we might hear a rustle in the bushes, think, oh, you know, it's some kind of predator. So we run away to safety. But rather than just calm down, we then start thinking, what just happened? We go over it and over it, still triggering then the stress hormones. And then we think to ourselves, what if it happens again while I'm here in this new safe place? So we don't just suffer at the time when we're experiencing an adversity in life. We suffer for a long time after the adversity because we're going over what happened and then imagining if it's going to happen again. So human beings, we suffer. And this is what mindfulness is all about, is to try and ease that suffering. We can't take away the adversities and life's challenges that happen to you, but we can ease or lessen the suffering that goes along with those adversities. So keep practicing, everybody. You can go over sessions 1 and 2 to practice your breath meditations. Or you can go on to various websites and apps to use guided meditation practices there as well. Okay, so I shall look forward to seeing you again for next week's session 4. Happy practicing.